Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we'll start with the
So
first.
Krishna, she became very charmed by Krishna.
Antavanta ime deha
अंतवंत इमे देहा
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरनः
नित्यशोक्ता शरीरिणः
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत।
तस्माद् यत्यस्व भारत
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
नित्यशोक्ता शरीरिणः
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत।
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत।
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत
Someone like to chant?
अंतवंत इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
नित्यसुप्ताः शरीरिणाः
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
अनाशीनो अप्रमेयश्च
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्मात् युद्धस्य भारत
तस्माद् युद्धस्व भारत
अंतवंत इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
नित्ययुक्त्या शरीरिणः
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
अनासीनो प्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद्युध्यस्व भारत।
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत अन्तवन्त
Go ahead, Mataji.
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त
नित्यस्योक्ता शरीरिणः
नित्यस्योक्ता
शरीरिणः
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत
तस्माद्
युद्धस्य भारत
अंतवंत इमे देहा
अन्तवन्त इमे देहा
नित्यशोक्ताः शरीरिणः
नित्यस्योक्ताः शरीरिणः
अनासीनो अप्रमेयस्य
अनाशीनो प्रमेयस्य
तस्माद् युद्धस्व भारत।
तस्माद् युध्यस्व भारत
Okay, word by word meaning. Antavanta
अन्तवन्त perishable
ime
इमे
all these
all these
deha
देहा
material bodies
material bodies
nityasya
नित्यस्य
eternal in existence
eternal in existence
ukta
ukta
are said
said
sharirinah
sharirinah
of the embodied soul
of the embodied soul
anashinah
anashinah
never to be destroyed
never to be destroyed
aprameyasya
aprameyasya
immeasurable
immeasurable
tasmat
tasmat
therefore yudhyasva
yudyasva
fight
fight
bharata
bharata
O descendant of Bharat.
or descendant of Bharat.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. Translation once again. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. Purport. The material body is perishable by nature. It may perish immediately, or it may do so after 100 years. It is a question of time only. There is no chance of maintaining it indefinitely. But the spirit soul is so minute that it cannot even be seen by an enemy, to say nothing of being killed. As mentioned in the previous verse, it is so small that no one can have any idea how to measure its dimension. So from both viewpoints, there is no cause of lamentation, because the living entity, as he is, cannot be killed, nor can the material body be saved for any length of time or permanently protected. The minute particle of the whole spirit acquires this material body according to his work, and therefore observance of religious principles should be utilized. In the Vedanta Sutras, the living entity is qualified as light because he is part and parcel of the supreme light. As sunlight maintains the entire universe, so the light of the soul maintains this material body. As soon as the spirit soul is out of this material body, the body begins to decompose. Therefore, it is the spirit soul which maintains this body. The body itself is unimportant. Arjun was advised to fight and not sacrifice the cause of religion for material bodily considerations. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitya Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pichare Nirvisheshu. In this chapter, right, we see, as in the previous chapter, Arjun is in a distressed situation. He is in the middle of the battleground, the middle of the two armies, right? There is a war going on, and he does not want to fight, and he gives all kind of explanations, right? But primarily, all of those explanations are coming from a bodily platform, right? By the understanding that we are the body, right? So the first thing that Krishna does is to explain to him that we are actually not this body, but we are the soul, right? So here, Krishna is mentioning that the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end, right? So there are two things that Krishna is saying, right? Number one, we are not this material body, right? We are soul. And the nature of the soul is that it cannot be killed, right? Forget of it being killed. It is so small that it cannot even be measured, right? So forget about killing it. Like no one, if I cannot even see it, right? Just forget about it. Basically, it is nothing material, right? You cannot, something material cannot kill anything that is not a material, right? That's the whole point. Just like when you are, if you think that an animated being like an avatar or an animated being inside a video game, right? It is made of bits and pixels, right? It cannot kill the body, right? Because it's in a totally different dimension, right? It is a totally separate thing versus this material body, right? So we are talking about two very different things, right? Similarly, soul and this material body are very, very different, right? And Krishna explains it very nicely, the understanding that Krishna gives about the three energies, right? Antaranga, Bahiranga, and Tatastha, right? These are the three energies of Krishna, the Supreme Person. Antaranga energy is his internal potency, right? The internal pleasure potency, it is called, right? It is the internal pleasure potency of the Lord, Antaranga Shakti. And Bahiranga is the external material energy of Krishna, right? So everything that we see around us, right? Bhumirapo nalo vayu, kham man buddhi revacha ahankar, itiyam me bhinna prakriti ashtada, right? So these 8, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, right? So Krishna is basically saying that 8, all of these 8 constitute my external energy, external potency of Krishna, right? And the third one, Tatastha, right? Tatastha means marginal, right? So that's where the living entities fall. And Tatastha, marginal because they have a free will and therefore they can decide whether they want to interact with the external energy of Krishna, that is Maya, or they want to interact with the internal potency of Krishna, which is the pleasure potency of Krishna, right? Which is basically, if you, Radharani is the embodiment, or basically the deity of that external potency of the Lord. Right? So because the living entities, they can decide whether they want to interact with material energy of Krishna or the internal potency. That's why they are called the marginal potency of Krishna. But they are definitely not material, right? They have a free will. So that's the difference between living entity and the material energy of Krishna. They are two very distinct things, although they are both energy of Krishna. But the difference is that the living entities, they have a free will, right? Therefore, they can decide for themselves to a certain extent, right? Of course, the free will is not infinite, but they have a free will. But the external energy of Krishna, it does not have a free will, right? So that's the basic difference. And therefore, because it is totally different, as I described in the verse that I just said, Bhumerapo nalo vayu, kham man buddhi revacha ahankar. Right? So these 8, right, they are distinct or separate from the soul, right? And therefore, something that does not belong or something which is totally different, right? It cannot really interact in that sense, right? It cannot really kill. So therefore, material, anything material cannot really kill the soul. In fact, soul is indestructible, right? Na jayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya, ajo nityo shashvato yam puranu, na hanyate hanyamane sharire. That's the definition of soul. Na jayate mriyate, right? So those two, it never took birth and it will never die. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya. It never came into being, and it's not that at some point it will come into being, right? It has always been here. Na hanyate hanyamane sharira, right? Although this body may die, but what we are, the eternal soul, will never die, right? So that's the first point, that the soul can never be killed, right? And the other point that Krishna is making here in this verse is that the material body is destructible, right? So while the soul just can never be destroyed, the exact opposite is true in the case of this body, right? Because it is a universal fact that a body will die. It's just a matter of time, right? And in fact, the very concept of time applies in the case of the material energy of Krishna, or the body, because there is a beginning and there is an end to it, right? So everything in between is basically time, right? That's the basic definition of time. And the only utility of time is to track the duration between the beginning and the end. Therefore, in the spiritual realm, which is the majority of Krishna's creation, there is no concept of time, right? Because it's not needed. Everything there is eternal, right? And if everything is eternal, there is no point of time, right? It just does not make sense to have time there. In this material world, everything has a beginning and then everything has an end. So everything in between, you have to put a measurement to it, right? When is this thing going to die, right? Because we have limited, that particular resource is limited, so therefore we have to measure it. Anything that is limited needs to be measured, right? Otherwise there will be anarchy, isn't it? If the resources in this on this planet or in this world were unlimited, there wouldn't have been any utility of money, for example, right? Just like, these days there is a lot going on around, because of the coronavirus. There is a stimulus package. There's a debate going on whether the president should release this big $1.8 trillion of a stimulus, right? And people who are against it, they say that if you distribute free money to a lot of people, there will be inflation. The prices would rise, right? Because if too many people can afford the same object, they will be willing to pay more money for it, right? Eventually, till the point someone can win over that object, right? So this entire idea of putting a price on an object is the result of the very fact that this material world is limited. We have to understand that. If this material world was not limited, if everything here was infinite, it wouldn't have been there. There wouldn't really have been any cost attached to it, right? Because anyone then can afford it, right? Because it's freely available to everyone. So spiritual world, that is the very nature of it. You get whatever you want. Everything is available, right? Because it's not material, right? So that's the basic difference. So by that very nature, because of the limitness of material energy, right? The way the material world functions, everything is in this material world has a beginning and it has an end, right? And if everything has an end, the point that Krishna is making is, as we know that this is going to die, so why do you lament about it? It's just a matter of time. Eventually this will die, right? If you consider yourself to be the body, then eventually you have to die. And if you consider yourself to be the soul, then you're not going to die really, right? What's going to die is the body. So there is no point of lamenting even that. So Krishna, as he is the supreme person, right? He can win the argument no matter which way you twist it, right? Whether you hold the ear in the right way or you turn your hand around and hold it, right? He's the expert, right? He's the one who is the creator of the Vedas and the subject matter of the Vedas as well, right? So Vedescha sarve ahameva vedo vedanta vedkrite vacham, as Krishna says. So he's the expert, and therefore he is giving his argument as the expert, right? So this is the expert's argument, that because we are this body, we are not this body, but we are the soul, right? So no matter if you consider yourself the body, then you will have to die. So what's the point of holding yourself up? It's better that you fight for the religious principles, because you're a Kshatriya and it is your duty to fight for protecting the religious principles, right? So in that case, it makes sense for you to fight, because eventually you have to die. It's better that you die for a good cause, doing the right thing. And if you actually know the reality that you are the spirit soul, then you don't really have any reason to lament, right? Because you are transcendent, you are eternal, right? And once the body ends, because you are putting yourself into the right kind of act, right? So according to the laws of karma, you will in fact achieve a better platform. You will go to a better place, right? So in both ways, the right thing for Arjun to do at that point was to fight, right? So that's the argument that Krishna is presenting here, right? And this point actually, although Arjuna seems to be confused, but it is really for us, right? Because we always get confused about these things. The way we live our lives seems that we just think that we will never die. In fact, there is a pastime in Mahabharata when Yudhishthir, the eldest of the Pandavas, he goes to there is an entire episode where Yaksha, he asks some questions with Yudhishthir, right? Basically what happens is they are out. I don't really remember a lot of details, but the basic point was all of these Pandavas, they were out, they were exiled from their kingdom, right? And during that exile, they were going around into the forest. And during that time, they couldn't find water for a long time. So they were all very thirsty. And eventually what happens is they take a break because they are so thirsty, they can't really go any further. So one brother at a time goes out in search of water, right? And as one brother goes out in the search of the water, they find a very nice body of water. And they just are so thirsty, they start to drink without taking any permission from anyone. In fact, there is a transcendental voice that warns them that do not drink this water, otherwise you will die. But they do not listen because they are so thirsty, and they drink the water, and each of those brothers, they start dying one at a time. And ultimately Yudhishthir reaches there and he sees all of his brothers are dead. He is very sad, and he questions, the person who is the proprietor of that body of water. And ultimately he hears a voice that's of Yaksha, and he tells him that I will ask you a few questions. And if you answer all of those questions correctly, all of your brothers will live again, and you can take the water and quench your thirst. So as part of that pastime, one of the questions that was asked of Yudhishthir is, what is the greatest wonder What is the biggest surprise that you see in this world? And Yudhishthira answers that everyone knows that eventually he has to die, but he lives as if he would never die. So that is the biggest wonder, right? So all of us, we are sure of the fact that we will die, right? But we do not really consider, the way we live our lives, we do not really think that we would die. Otherwise, if I knew that eventually, if I'm conscious of the fact that I have to die and there is a karma, I will actually be scared of doing anything wrong, isn't it? I mean, if I know that this is a short life, right? There is a limited amount of time that I have, and eventually all of my endeavors will be frustrated, right? That is the very fact. We are doing all kinds of endeavors today, right? The basic endeavor is economic development, as we know, right? All of us are engaged in our economic development because that is the overarching worldview at this point, and it has been ever since, right? The primary obsession that we as humans have today is to improve our economic situation, right? And that's the overarching viewpoint. And that understanding, that worldview is based on the idea that economic development is directly proportional to happiness, right? Because everyone would agree to the fact that whatever we do, right, all of our endeavors are primarily directed for making us happy, right? Happiness is at the center, right? So we have this understanding that once we get more money, we will be happy, right? So that's the basic understanding. But if you think about it, right, if money was the overarching requirement for an individual to be happy, then that kind of happiness, majority of the people in this world will be bereft of it. And that is a practical fact, because majority of the world population is below the poverty line, or they hardly have any money, right? And they are in a constant endeavor, right? There is a constant endeavor to gain more and more money so that they can be happy, and they just keep working on that endeavor eventually till they die, till the point that they die, right? So we have made the object of happiness, the entire focus, the center, the worldview that we currently have. It has a major limitation, and that limitation is that the happiness that it intends for an individual to achieve is only viable for a very small fraction of the overall world population, right? If something that is so central to our survival, right, happiness, if it is so central to our survival, that is the entire focus of every individual's life, how can it be that it is only available to a handful of people, right? It just is counterintuitive, right? To give you an example, just like gravity, right? We know that if you throw an object up, it will automatically come down, right? Because it has to satisfy the law of gravity. It's very simple, right? There is a gravitational force, and no matter what object you throw it up, but it will naturally will come down, right? So its natural propensity is to satisfy the laws of gravity, isn't it? Right? That's the basic thing that we see. In fact, you have to make an effort to defy the law of gravity so that, you put some energy so that a ball can go up instead of coming down. You have to make an effort towards that. So if you go by that logic, we are always attracted towards happiness, isn't it? That's our natural propensity, that we always want to be happy. So for us to achieve or attain that state of happiness should be a natural thing, right? Without any effort, effortlessly, we should be able to be happy, isn't it? And in fact, it should take effort for us to go away from the happiness. But in this world, we see the exact opposite. Everyone has to make so much effort to get to their natural state of happiness. So that is why this is one of a very, it's being my recent realization, right? That's one of the very basic argument that we can give to counter these so-called rationalists, right, who just consider the entire spiritual science to be bogus, right? Any rationalist could be defeated by this argument, that what is being proposed or what is being shoved into the throats of everyone in the name of economic development is actually does not make sense, right? Because the natural propensity of every living entity is to be happy. And what is our natural propensity? we shouldn't really be, it shouldn't really take a lot of effort for us to achieve it. But what we see today is whatever the world leaders propose or they portray as happiness, it actually takes a lot of effort for an individual to achieve that, right? And therefore it cannot be natural, and it is not correct, right? So that's a very, I think it's a very important argument for us to understand. And that's where, Bhagavad Gita makes complete sense, right? It simply says that you are not this body, right? You are not a material. Therefore, the only reason you need material things is to satisfy the needs of the body. That's it. But it is foolishness for us to understand that as happiness, right? It is simply for us to fulfill the requirement because we have to keep the body and the soul together. The actual source of happiness lies somewhere else, for which there are no external factors that can influence that. So that's the understanding that Bhagavad Gita and Krishna is giving us, right? Which is a very sound understanding, because it is our natural propensity. As Krishna says, we are all part and parcels of Krishna. Mamevansho jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana, manasasthani indriyani, prakriti sthani karshati, as Krishna says. Mam ev ansh, right? We are certainly part and parcels of Krishna. And who is Krishna? Krishna is Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karan Karanam. Satchit Anand, right? He is the very, and Satchit Anand Vigraha. Vigraha means the deity, right? So he's the very deity that is of bliss. Anand means bliss, right? So he himself is complete bliss, and because we are his part and parcels, therefore we are always seeking bliss, right? That is the very reason. Just like, Newton had a question, why would an apple fall down, right? And the answer was because an apple has to satisfy the laws of gravity. Similarly, the answer to the question that why are we always seeking happiness is right here in Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas, right? Because we are all part and parcel of the supreme happiness, supreme bliss, and therefore we are always attracted to bliss, right? That's a very natural thing. That there's the explanation, right? And Krishna in the same verse is saying, Mame vansho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana, manasasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. And all of these living entities, we are actually working very hard. Karshati means struggling through man and the 5 gross senses that we have, right? Man or mind, right? So mind plus the 5 gross senses, it becomes 6. Manasasthani indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. Prakriti means the material energy of Krishna, right? Or the material world. So in this material world, all of us are struggling actually very hard, but we don't really have to, right? Because we are part and parcels of that supreme person. And that is the only thing that we need to understand, right? And gradually, when that understanding is attained, at that point, we will be satisfying the law of bliss, right? And the law of bliss is basically, we need to be engaged in the loving devotional service of Krishna, right? That is what we are lacking. As soon as that connection is complete, we will be in the natural state of blissfulness, right? And that's the difference between us and Krishna, that Krishna, he is supremely blissful, right? He does not really need anything to be blissful. He's naturally blissful, but we are dependent on our service to Krishna for our happiness, right? So once we engage ourselves in the service of Krishna, we will naturally become happy. And Prabhupada used to give the example of a hand and the belly, right? So the hand can be happy only when it is feeding the mouth so that the belly can be satisfied. But if someone thinks, oh, if the hand becomes envious of the belly, right, and it gets separated from the body, the hand will definitely die. But for the body, there is another hand to feed it, right? But if the hand gets separated from the body, there is no chance of survival for that hand. The belly still has the other hand to feed it, right? So that is an important idea for us to understand, that we are all separated sparks from the Supreme Person, from Krishna. And our natural propensity lies in serving Krishna. And when we do that, that is what will make us happy, right? That is our natural state. And that is, to achieve that is actually effortless, right? But because of our conditioning, because of our attachment to the material energy of Krishna, which has been going on for so many lifetimes, right? Because of that material conditioning, there is a thick layer of ignorance, that has been deposited on our minds. And therefore, the effort needs to be put into place to cleanse this heart, right? Cheto darpan marjanam bhav mahadavagni nirmapanam, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, right? That's where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu starts in Shikshastakam. Cheto darpan marjanam. If you consider a mind to be the mirror, right? Chitta, right? What we are. Darpan means mirror, right? Marjan means to cleanse. So we need to cleanse the heart. And how do we cleanse that heart? By chanting the names of the Lord. Cheto darpan marjanam bhav mahadavagni nirvapranam. Shreya kairav chandrika vitranam vidyavadu jivanam. Anandam buddhi vardhanam pratipadam. Purnamrita swadanam. Right. So that is the quality of the holy names of the Lord. As we chant more and more, gradually that thick layer of ignorance that has been deposited on our minds and our heart, that will gradually get cleansed. And as it gets cleansed up, our natural propensity to engage in the loving service of Krishna will automatically be awakened. And as that happens, we will just naturally go and engage in the service of Krishna without any effort. That will be spontaneous, right? And that is called Raganuga Bhakti. A spontaneous love towards the lotus feet of Krishna will be developed. Currently, what we are doing is called Raga Bhakti, right? Where we have to follow the rules and regulations, the regulative principles of devotional service, do's and don'ts, right? So we have to make that much effort for some time, sincerely and diligently, not because this effort is different from the effort that we make in the material world, right? The effort that we make in the material world is by the understanding that if we make more and more money, right, gradually that will lead us to be more happy, right? So, but that is, as I explained before, that is actually moving in the opposite direction, right? That is totally wrong. It's like, understanding that a ball has to go up instead of it to go down, right? But the other effort that goes into cleansing the heart by chanting the names of the Lord, it's like a medicine, right? So because we have been forgetful of our natural propensity to engage in the loving service of Krishna for so long, it needs to be reminded to us, right? And that memory will come back when we repeat the names of the Lord over and over again. Gradually, that cleansing process will take place, and eventually we will attain a state where we can naturally, because it's a natural propensity, no matter which person, currently we may be ignorant, and not just humans, even these plants, animals, every living entity, basically, right? Every living entity, it's its natural propensity to be Krishna conscious. But because of our material conditioning for so long, we have become forgetful of it. So all that is needed is we have to put that spiritual spark back by chanting the names of the Lord and by following these regulative principles, right? So when we do that over a period of time, gradually that cleansing will happen. And as that cleansing happens, naturally, our taste towards chanting the names of the Lord will increase. The example that is given is that of a sugarcane candy, right? So there is a sugarcane candy and there is a person, or the sugarcane juice, right? In jaundice, it is usually recommended to drink sugarcane juice, right? And as that diseased person, that patient drinks that juice, it tastes really bitter, right? Because it's not that the juice itself is bitter, but because of conditioning of our taste buds, when a person is diseased, it appears to be bitter, right? But that sugar cane juice itself is also the medicine, right? So as the person keeps on taking that medicine, eventually the jaundice will go away. He will be cured of jaundice. And as that happens, that same sugarcane juice will start to taste sweet again, right? So similarly, in our current material situation, because of our material conditioning, when we chant the holy names of the Lord, it seems like a struggle, right? We can't really get any taste in it. In fact, the mind wants to go and enjoy the material life, the material energy of Krishna. But as we keep doing it diligently, right, following the rules and regulations and avoiding the offenses, once we take up to offenseless chanting of the names of the Lord sincerely, it's like a medicine, right? It will naturally work. And as it naturally works, gradually what will happen is all of that preconditioning that we have had, or prarabdhas, anartha nivritti will take place. Anartha nivritti means everything, all of the material conditioning that we have will gradually wane away, right? And as that wanes away, gradually we can see that we are making progress, right? So the process, there are 9 different stages in bhakti, right? The first one is Shraddha. One has to have a little faith, because without faith you cannot really start anything, right? Just when we are kids and we go to school, right, we are simply put into it, right? Because we don't really have a choice, because our parents have faith. They have seen it that if my son or my daughter goes to the school, eventually he can create a good life for himself, right? And when we start learning, when the teacher says A for apple, we just trust him. We do not question that why is A for apple, why is A for not B, right? Or A for cat, why is not that? So we do not question, we just listen. And gradually when we understand, eventually it starts to make sense, right? So it is very, very important. That's the very first step, Ado Shraddha, right? So that's where it starts. We have to have a little faith. And that for us to have that faith, a living entity has to first realize that this is a very precarious situation where we are, right? Till the time we think that, by these so-called foolish rationalists, that, science has the solution to everything and there is nothing beyond this material world. And, most of the people who have made a good living, that's, you would find that they kind of think that way. They have a good life today, but tomorrow they don't know that they will be kicked out, right? No matter who a person is. Eventually, when the death comes, it will be gone. In fact, I remember I was having an argument with a person once. And I was telling him about this aspect, and that is what really attracted me towards Krishna consciousness. That I always used to wonder that people are making so much effort to make money and all of that, right? But eventually everyone has to die, and this question used to bother me a lot. And that is one of the things that really attracted me to Bhagavad Gita when I first came, right? So that question always stays with me. And whenever I have an argument with any of my friends, that's the reasoning I give, that whatever efforts we make, eventually we will die, right? And when I do that, many people come to me and they say, oh, you are being pessimistic, everyone has to die, why do you have to worry about it today? You are just so young, you still have a lot of life left, right? But the reality is, as Prahlad Maharaj tells us, that death can come at any point. There is no guarantee that a person will live for 100 years, right? Any moment the death can strike. So that's also the answer that Yudhishthira Maharaj gave, right? We think that death will not come and that's how we live, but that is foolishness. We have to understand the facts, and that's why a spiritualist is more practical than even the scientist, right? Because he is not closing his eyes to the eternal facts of life. There are the 4 basic problems that we have in this world, right? Birth, old age, disease, and death. There is no avoiding these 4. And as long as we have closed our eyes to these 4 facts of life, that is actually a pessimistic way of living, right? But a person who is trying to understand what are those 4 problems and trying to find a solution. And the fact is that the entire solution has already been provided to us, right? In Bhagavad Gita, in all of the Vedic literature. If you just read the literature that has been provided to us by our acharyas, it will take millennium to really go through it, right? There are so much detail. Each and every aspect has been dealt with so minutely, right? No material science has such a huge body of literature available for us to explore these ideas, right? We just have to find time and apply our intelligence to be able to do this, right? As long as we follow the materialistic world order, right? As is called the Bhed Chal. Everyone is following that Bhed Chal, basically. No one is living consciously. But if a living entity really lives consciously, right? Krishna has provided sufficient brain in this human form of life. And this higher intelligence has been provided to do this critical analysis of these basic 4 problems that we have in our lives, right? Birth, old age, disease, and death. Why do we have to go through that, right? And then Krishna gave us Bhagavad Gita where he has so nicely spoken about all of these things in just 700 verses. He has pretty much given us the entire life manual, right? And then Prabhupada, out of his extreme mercy, coming directly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has explained all of these verses so nicely to us. And even now, if we cannot take this seriously and practice it sincerely, that will be the biggest misfortune. As Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyante Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Right? So after many, many lifetimes, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan, an intelligent person, a truly intelligent person, Mam Prapadyate, surrenders unto me. Vasudeva Sarvamiti, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is everything. Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. Such great souls are extremely rare, he says, right? So Durlabh means rare. And when you attach a su to it, it's a superlative, right? So he's saying it's not just rare, it is extremely rare to find such a soul, right? So we should consider ourselves to be extremely fortunate that we are attracted to this science and we found guidance in the books of Srila Prabhupada and in ISKCON. We are directly under the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we should not have any doubt about it. There should not be any doubt that we are not in the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This movement is a direct benediction coming from Mahaprabhu, and there is no doubt about it, right? And we should consider ourselves extremely fortunate to have, by having received this mercy. And it would be the worst thing that we can do to ourselves if we ignore this mercy and let it go. Although Mahaprabhu is very, very kind, somehow or the other, he will reclaim. But we should be intelligent enough to just stick to it. And Prabhupada has given us everything, and this movement has given us everything in Sampradaya, in Guru Parampara, and the disciplic succession. If we just stick to the prescription, it's like driving, sitting in an autonomous car, right? You don't really have to drive. The car will eventually take you to the destination. We just have to make sure that we sit inside it, right? We don't get out. And as long as we do that, we are in very, very safe hands in this movement. So I would conclude by praying to all of you that, let's stick with it and practice sincerely based on the guidance that has been provided to us by our ultimate Shiksha Guru Srila Prabhupada and by our spiritual master and all of the Vaishnavacharyas. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free.
Viram Prabhu, wonderful class. I love your analogies, First of all, I am also accused of being pessimistic and think about death, and they think like you don't live, you're always talking about death. But Chanakya Pandit said, if you want to make spiritual progress, you have to think you're going to die any moment.
Right.
And if you want to make material progress, think you're going to live forever, So, and also I loved your analogy where you said, like, I hadn't even thought about that happiness is our natural constitutional position and we're always seeking it, just like a weighted object is attracted to the gravity of the earth, and I was thinking, even to like fly a plane, it requires so much energy and fuel, to go against the gravity, to keep it up in the air, and it can't stay in the air forever. It has to come down, right?
Yeah.
At some point. So that's like our trying to spin our wheels to get happiness. We might get it for a little while,
Right.
Against the gravity of our natural constitutional position, but at some point it has to come down in this material world, and it's practically impossible to find that happiness that we're looking for. So like you said, there has to be another source, right? Then because we're always looking for it, like you said. So I love that analogy of yours. It really struck home for me.
Thank you, Mataji. Anyone else, any questions or comments? Yeah, so this point about, gravity, actually I was doing my rounds recently And
Mhm.
it is my realization that whenever I'm chanting, some of
Mhm.
this automatically naturally come into my head. And some of these questions have been with me for so long, and suddenly I find an answer to it.
I know. Well, Krishna is giving you some of the realizations, but it's a really nice realization. I had
Yeah.
never thought about it that way. But that's so, you don't think of that everybody's seeking happiness, and that happiness has to be your constitutional position. Otherwise, why would you be constantly seeking it?
Exactly.
And obviously, we know that we cannot find perfect happiness here, so it has to be somewhere else. And that's a
Right.
very good argument, like you said, for someone who thinks that there is nothing spiritual.
Exactly, Mataji. Yeah. Because I always used to think, I've had arguments with a lot of materialistic people, and I like to do that. I'm always,
Mhm.
when it comes to, I usually don't really find it interesting to get into a debate. I just keep it to myself usually, because I strongly feel it is difficult to change ideas. It is difficult to change people. But when it comes to the understanding, the overarching understanding of life, I just naturally get excited, because even if we are not able to convince the other person, whatever little we talk to him, because it is coming through parampara, someday or the other it will take some effect, right? So it definitely has a benefit. So we should always try to do that. Of course, if someone is envious, we should not, as it's one of the 10 offenses, right? Then we should stay away. But if the person shows little genuine interest, we should do that. And during one of those arguments, a few of them, uh, everyone kind of comes to this, right? That this is what we are doing. So what's wrong in what we are doing? And basically what we are doing is economic development, and we are not against economic development. Of course, even in ISKCON, we are going out asking for donations, because we need money for creating temples and all of that. But what we have to understand is that economic development cannot be the center of our lives. It is important, just like the other example that I usually like is if you're traveling in an airplane, right? It is important that you have a comfortable trip, right? That
Mhm.
you don't have to be, standing for 15 hours till you reach India. You have to at least have a seat. So that
Right.
you need. But you do not really, if you just waste your entire time in thinking that you have to move from the economy class to the business class, if your entire endeavor is spent just with that, that would be a very foolish thing, right? Because it's just a matter of 15 hours, and eventually what's important is that you safely reach your destination, right? That's more important. Similarly, this economic development has a utility just to the point that it is needed for our survival. We should have a life wherein you are not uncomfortable enough, where it becomes difficult for you to, put your consciousness towards Krishna consciousness, right? There is not too much of an unrest. But as long as you are in a somewhat okay kind of a situation where, you can live a relatively comfortable life, then the rest of the effort should really be made in making progress towards Krishna consciousness, right? So the center of the life, the goal should be very, very clear. And the very clear argument that goal cannot be economic development, I used to kind of think about it a lot. And one day this idea just kind of struck me, and it makes so much sense that, if something is so important for our survival, it should be natural, right? There is no way that it cannot be natural, right? Because if that was not natural, why do so many of us, everyone who you talk to, everyone wants to be happy, right? That's the whole point of our entire existence. So to attain happiness should not be this difficult. It should not be a struggle.
I know, but I find two kinds of people. One who are running like a hamster on a wheel, looking for
Yeah.
happiness. Or there are existentialists who think like, even my granddaughter says this sometimes,
Yeah.
that's what they teach them in school. You
Uh-huh.
get what you get, so don't get upset.
Ah.
Meaning to say, like, just live life with whatever you get, that you're still not seeking something,
Right, right, right.
that's higher in life, higher goal in life. So you can't be either. Like, you can't be a total existential pessimist, and
Right,
also looking for happiness like a hamster on a wheel.
right, exactly. Yeah. Yes.
So, but
That,
I don't know how you would preach to these people. I mean, I like the happiness example of yours. That
yeah.
even if you're seeking happiness, have you ever found it permanent happiness? You have not.
Yeah.
Obviously, you want it. That's why you're
Right.
seeking it. But how do you I don't know how you would preach to those existentialists who think like you get what you get and you don't get upset.
Yeah, no, actually, that's a very classic case, Mataji, right? In fact, that's the Shunyavad philosophy, right?
Right.
Shunyavad is essentially means you just, whatever you have, right? Just think as if it just exists, right? Don't worry about it. So their big focus, if you look at closely at their meditation is more in terms of giving up what they have. That's the only thing that they focus on, right?
Or accepting things as they are,
As they are.
without making any change to
Basically,
it.
exactly, right? So basically trying to make it irrelevant, right? That's the entire focus. So that's like the very initial step in this direction. Of course, right? I mean, the first step is you get away from material energy, right? So when you make it irrelevant, you just don't care, whatever you have, you just accept it. So that's the philosophy of kind of
Right. Like, for example, we accept things as they are also, but at the same time, we aspire for service, Krishna's service, which we know gives us permanent happiness,
Exactly.
So it's not like we're not looking, I mean, not that we're expressly looking for happiness. We just know that Krishna's service gives us permanent happiness.
Exactly.
And we don't need to do anything else,
Right.
So we are not existentialists who just accept things as they are, but
Right.
don't do something to get to a place of happiness,
Exactly, right? So our focus is not to make this world irrelevant. We do not consider this world to be irrelevant, but we consider
Right.
we put into, we find it relevant in connection to Krishna, right? The Prabhupada used to give an example of the dictaphone, right? So a dictaphone is something that, the scientists have created, and they are using it for material purposes. But that same dictaphone, Prabhupada was able to engage in the service of Krishna by using it, utilizing it in writing so much literature, right? So the focus of the devotee is to use everything that has been provided to us, including the body and this material world, in the service of Krishna, right? So it's like a positive engagement versus simply disengaging from the material energy of Krishna, right? So our focus is not just on disengaging, but it's on engagement. And with that engagement, gradually the disenchantment will automatically come towards material energy. So that's where we are different from the Shunyavad and impersonalist philosophy.
Right.
Yeah, but as you said, right, it's not possible to convince everyone. And if everyone it was easy to convince, then there wouldn't exist this material world, right? So everyone has their preconditions, they have done in their previous lives. There are old prarabdhas. And as Krishna says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante, right? That word said.
I know. Sometimes that gets you pessimistic that we
Right.
can't convince people.
Right. But, in my experience, even if they're not convinced, right, we should try to give them a little something. And even that little something, you don't know when this will bloom. It could
Exactly.
It in some corner of the mind, somewhere or the other, right? And at some place, it might just come back to them. Oh, okay, yeah, I heard it somewhere. It makes sense, right? So we should never stop. Of course, if someone is envious, we should not. If they start to blaspheme, then we should immediately step away, because that way they are creating problems for themselves.
Right. You've heard of the story of that old man in Bombay, right, who came to visit Srila Prabhupada? It was, I think it was pretty late in the evening or something, and Srila Prabhupada did not have time to see him. But nonetheless, some of his disciples insisted that he was insisting to see Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada saw him. And I think he was very ill, and not doing very well at all. His legs were all like, swollen, and, he was not doing well at all. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, having Divya Drishti, must have seen, what is happening to this man. And he came and talked to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada chanted on some beads and gave him the beads. I mean, he didn't initiate him or do anything, but just gave him the beads. And he died the next day chanting the beads in his hand.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So it's like you don't know, even at the last moment.
Exactly.
You might get something that might, take you back,
Exactly. Right. So Jiver Daya is the first principle, right? A devotee is naturally kind towards all living entities, and Prabhupada is the epitome of that.
Right.
Out of our very nature, it's a good thing. Even if someone would reject, that's fine. We should give it a try. As long as the other person is not blaspheming, I do not really see a problem in us trying to preach them, tell them stuff, even if, if they reject, that is fine.
That's why we give them a book, Prabhu. If you give them a book, it stays in their home and their bookshelf. And then at some point in their lives, when they're dejected or something, they'll pick up the book and they'll get their answer, And
Exactly.
Prabhupada says, what will your 5 minutes of preaching do? Give them a book, which
Absolutely.
will permanently stay with them.
Absolutely, right? One example is used as time bomb, right? A book is like a time bomb. Someday or the other, when it opens up, that will make everything transcendental, right? So absolutely, that there cannot be a better preaching than book distribution, Mataji.
Yeah, and also they said, if you can get something out for the book, do that. Because if you give it a free book, sometimes they toss it in the trash.
Exactly.
But even if they've given $1, nobody likes to throw $1 in the
Right.
So they'll say, okay, I'll just keep it, even if
Right.
it's a small amount, and that gives them some sukriti and they start from that point. That's why we ask for a donation, however small, sometimes they say, oh, we don't have money. So even
Yeah.
if you have a couple of dollars and people will say, and I always say, it's like for a cup of coffee, most people are
Right.
addicted to coffee in this country.
Yeah.
It's like a cup of Starbucks, coffee, $5 for a Bhagavad Gita. It's not much, then say, okay, just to get rid of us, they'll just give us the money. But
Right.
because they've given the money, they hang on to the book, because even if
Right.
it's a small amount, and then
Yeah.
that becomes their benefit thing in the future, so
Exactly.
that's the technique.
That's a very, very good point, Mataji. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you have such wonderful realizations because you are one of the most active book distributors in our congregation.
No, Prabhu, during COVID season, I don't do anything. But
Okay.
again, even if we give some money for other people to distribute, I feel like little bit safe, I've done a
Right.
little bit of sign. I really don't have much energy or anything. So anyway, let us see. Prabhupada will be merciful.
Absolutely.
And at
Mataji.
least I feel, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, at least you have made a few steps in the right direction, even if you're not in your final destination.
Certainly.
No.
Absolutely. That's a very good point, Mataji. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your realizations. Okay, so it's 8 p.m. Anyone has any last comments or questions?
Okay, Prabhu. So if we nothing, then we can go for quiz.
Okay, yes, Prabhuji, please.
I hope everyone is seeing the question, right? Yeah, I'm getting some answers. That means yes. I'm getting very wide range of answers today. I hope I haven't confused anyone.
I came late, so I'm did the best, my best guess.
I was going in and out too, so I have no idea what he said in between.
Okay, we have, I think, more 4 devotees are left. Maybe we can take 1 more minute. Okay, last one devotee. All right, will close in a 10-second. If anyone is answering, please let me know. Okay, we can close now. Thank you. And polling and share result. So the first question is, what are the characteristics of soul? This is from today's verse. Soul is indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal. That's first, second, and fourth is correct answer. How does one acquire the material body? In the purport, it's mentioned that one acquires the material body according to its one's own work, right? I mean, it's interesting. Someone selected soul is given choice to pick up a material body if wants. That's that's not the correct. If that is the case, I would have picked up some.
But you also put Yamaraja. Philosophically, that is what we didn't discuss that, right? Karmana, Daivane, both are there.
Next is how does this verse help Arjuna to overcome lamentation and material compassion? And in this verse, Krishna is saying that the living entity cannot be killed and the material body cannot be saved of any length of time. These 2 points, and also the third one, as soon as the spirit soul is body, the body begins to decompose. So the 3 points are correct. In fact, all of the above, if someone's chosen, that's correct. So which analogy is mentioned to compare the living entity? Okay, so all answer I see. So in this purport, Prabhupada gives the example of light. It's compared with the living entity. So second answer is correct. And what are the different energies of the Lord? So here the Antaranga, Bahiranga, and Tathastha. Ladini Sakti, it is not a Lord's energy, right? It's a Radharani, correct? So that's why the first 3 is correct. And also Prabhuji discussed today. Which pastimes of Mahabharata did speaker told today? So the pastime was Yudhishthira Maharaj and Yaksha, right? The drinking of water and all died. So that pastimes Prabhuji discussed today. And which scientist example did Prabhuji told today? So the scientist was, it is the apple fall down, right? That example So it's Newton. Okay. And which verse of Sishtastakam Prabhuji discussed? Okay, that is Cheto Darpana Marjana. So that verse Prabhuji discussed today. And finally, what are the two broad category of sadhana bhakti? Okay, sadhana bhakti has two types of sadhana bhakti. One is Vaidhi sadhana, second is Raganuga sadhana bhakti. Okay, these two words, not the bhava sadhana. There is and prema sadhana. That's not under sadhana. So that's all for today's discussion, and thank you for participating in the quiz. Hare Krishna.
Good questions, Rasraj Prabhu.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, very good.
Very nice. Okay, so we'll pay obeisances to all the Vaishnavas. Vancha kalpataru.
Chakalpatara Vishikapasindabhya Vichapati Tanam Bhavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namo Namo.
Anantakoti Vaishnavant ki jai, Srila
Anantakoti
Prabhupada ki
Vaishnavant ki
jai,
jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Abhiram Prabhu
Devya
ki jai.
Prabhu ki jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much.